Uh, Good evening, morning, or afternoon, whenever you decide to watch this, Miss Stone. This is my reading conference journal for AP Lit. And so, uh, my growth as a reader, as a writer, and as a student in your class, compared from August to now. At first, as I was going over, or my initial thoughts going into this assignment, I was thinking I had barely grown. However, as I delve more of a deeper look in self-reflection, from my initial responses in my left side of my reading journal compared to now, I could definitely tell that as the months went by, as weeks went by, as the text and the literary pieces that we continued to read together and forced to do more reflections about, I realized that I had grown tremendously. And so throughout the few months in AP English language and literature, um, as time went on and on and on, as time went on and on again, right? Uh, I felt like I had grown. That allowed me to develop my skills towards approaching literature with a blank slate, which you can say, right? Allowing myself to take in all as much information as I can initially, and then before I can form my own initial thoughts. And so, my main points I will be talking about today is just my growth as a reader, as a writer, and then as a student as well. And so, getting to my first point as my growth as a reader. Um, Initially, when we first started reading, when the first piece together, it was the Nabokov's like good readers and good writers, right? Um, I can tell that from my responses or my writer responses that it, it was very, what is it, one-dimensional. I hadn't given much thought or much process into how I would approach how I would answer your questions. And so, as I'm looking through my responses on my left side, as a result, they're very what would you say? They're not very flushed. Until as like as a young reader, I say young, even though it's like a couple months ago, but even just reading my how I structure my sentences and my diction and the words I used, um, even just immediately my first response or first sentence, reading through my responses, it almost feels reading through my responses, it almost feels I have to give myself enough time to fully flesh out my response. Even immediately, I knew that I hadn't put forth my best effort giving my into giving a full like self-reflection. And so I followed up with without fail. I always manage to I always forget to manage my time better, and I can tell that my writing is a bit poor just because of how redundant my responses can be. And so I feel like it's a testament to myself as a student where my ability or my inability to manage my time, my self-management skills, as well as my flaw as a procrastinator had led to what was it responses that I wouldn't be able to give compared to now, right? However, as we continue to read more literary pieces, I think I was starting to understand that this was a change I needed to make in order to become a better student in general, right? And so I think one of the first responses where I actually realized that if I can really put my stuff all together and like hold myself accountable for who I am and what I do, um, I can provide responses that, an advanced placement student should provide. And so within my Beowulf reflection, I noticed that or when I've grown from my previous reflection from Nabokov, right, I realized that in order to become a better writer, my responses, I had to learn to be more intimate and more not emotional, but more comfortable with showing more emotions in my writing. And so I think Beowulf was one of the first times where I had to read an archaic piece where I did struggle for the first time in a long while. And so immediately first sentence in my first response, it was just I was uncomfortable reading poetry. especially with the heroic couplets that Beowulf, was structured in, and it definitely made it a lot harder to understand how to approach the text, right? Coming out from Nabokov's of reading with your spine and then being able to read with any judgment, right? It was really hard to get past that idea of reading without any judgment, without putting any ideas from before even reading it. And so it did affect how I came to the piece, but you know, my idea of or my goal of always wanting to learn and wanting to grow was hard, to really put past that mental setback or a mental block. And so I realized that as I started to embrace that idea more, I could notice that in my responses where I had said, when it comes to reading poetry with archaic texts, when knowing the context matters, constantly revising old notes and making an understanding of the text, it makes it easier to digest. And so it wasn't the fact that I only set forth like I had attempted or made the most of my efforts to get through that mental block. It was also being able to focus on myself as a student, revising over and over and over again about what the context of Beowulf is, what's going on around that time. And constantly revising my notes as I said, in order to understand the text and be able to um, provide a more fleshed out reading responses. Especially, I wish you could see my reading journal itself because compared to my first time with Nabokov, my reflect like just in itself, the reflections or my responses for Nabokov was only 3 paragraphs, barely half a page, almost barely half a page. However, for my Beowulf reflection, right, I can definitely tell just quick glance at yes, like I did seriously put in time and effort to really understand, reading and writing. And so as a reader, I was able to learn how to read, not read, but like how to approach literary texts without judgment, without fear, without realizing, oh my God, how am I going to be able to break down the sentence structure? How am I going to be able to understand, what the author or the writer's trying to say, right? And so, well, this is one of the first examples of where I started to realize that, yes, I'm becoming a better reader. Along with that, it was just now learning how can I become a better writer. So, as mentioned, like throughout my response or throughout my reading conference journal, I realized that um, my writing was poor, right? Um,